The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod.
Hi, friend.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay.
Glad to be here with you
Yes,
on this
to be with
wonderful
you.
day. We got a big show, big show. Two wonderful guests that we're going to have on the show. A little bit later on, we're going to have Gretchen Leary, who's a self-advocate and is going to be talking with us about some of the poetry books that she's written, plus a project that she has, BostonCalm, that she's working on. And then in just a little while, we're going to have Dr. William Lane, author of this book, Stop Being Invisible, Overcoming Communication Barriers. And this is, it's almost like a workbook format. And the reason why Dr. Lane wrote this was because he was someone who was identified as being a bad communicator. He had very limited communication skills, and he overcame that and thought, I think that I can help some other people who have issues with communication, which is very definitely, it's one of the criteria to get an autism spectrum diagnosis, is that you have difficulty with communication. So it's getting a lot of attention from people on the spectrum as being something that can be helpful and useful for people who want to improve their communication skills. So we're going to talk with him in a little while.
Good.
First, we have some news. And some of it is a little bit older because we wanted to cover it last week and didn't get to it last week. But did you see this first one? Had you seen it? It was a big deal last week online. The mom who had to send her son, who's on the autism spectrum, on a plane by himself.
No, I hadn't seen it, but she had to send him flying solo for the first time to go to Oregon.
7
to visit his
years
dad.
Old on the spectrum.
Right,
To see
I
his
would
dad.
be nervous about that.
I honestly, I couldn't have done that.
I couldn't have either.
My son is 16 and I don't want him flying by himself. You know, so here we go. But, you know, sometimes families have to do these things. And so she was concerned and put him on a plane with a note and $10.
Right, as a thank you for whoever might be sitting next to him.
Yes, because he might have a lot of questions. He might repeat things over and over again. And she wanted to sort of mitigate it in whatever way she could. So the note and the $10, which like, honestly, I just think that's like one of the bravest things I've ever heard. I'm not even sure if it's like, you know, it's kind of crazy smart, but a little scary to me. But in any case, it ended up very, you know, sometimes the universe rises up to meet good intentions.
And he was sitting next to a man named Ben Pedraza, who sent a comforting message to the mom along with a photo because he had such a good time with him.
And then donated the $10.
To Autism Society.
Yes. And so isn't it nice to know that there are good people left on the planet?
Yes.
And, you know, they became buddies on the plane and had wonderful conversations, and it became a little bit of a viral thing last week that people were very excited about it. But look at that face. I believe this is the
what
picture
a sweet boy.
that the passenger sent to the mom, and was like, hey, you know, I really didn't need to be paid to be a nice person. We need more people
nice
like
people
that.
in the world.
In any case, I just thought it was a feel-good story. A really interesting study, very in-depth, something in the medical press that came out last week. More information about what it is that happens in the brain that ends up looking like autism, right? And my understanding of this, they've been able to identify in the brain. This is so fascinating to me. And I would encourage you check it out. They're able to light up and see that the way the neurons grow in the brain, it's like a scaffold system.
Right.
And that one thing builds on another thing, builds on another thing, builds on another thing, and that they've been able to identify a radial glial cell that is a little bit different in autism.
It's mutated, as they say.
And so it creates a different situation than the scaffold, which makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I always remember that people, when Jem was being diagnosed, I asked somebody, well, what is it that happens in the brain? And they were saying, well, we see that the brain starts to grow rapidly and we don't know why, and that it doesn't have time to create all the pathways that it should. So sometimes we see people who are on the spectrum who are brilliant at a very young age and have like the equivalent of long distance service, that they can do things that other kids can't, but they don't have local service. And I thought, what an interesting way to explain that. And now to superimpose that it really is like this scaffold system that gets built,
Right.
that some information has to be able to go up the scaffold, but if there's a mutation, that it builds in a different way. It literally is a different operating system.
Right.
Which is sort of fascinating. And they have pictures of it. I don't even know how they do that. And they can light up these certain cells in the brain. I don't get it, but I think it's a fascinating thing that you now, for so long, you know, there were so many things about autism that was subjective. You look at this set of criteria and you go like this. Now they're starting to see that they really can see differences in the way, in the cells in the brain.
Right.
Which is fascinating.
Right.
Anyway, you can check that out in Medical Press for more information.
And more studies, 3 recent studies have linked air pollution to autism.
Yeah. And this is...
It's disturbing because so many cities, and 55% of the world's population lives in a city.
Yeah.
And obviously in cities, there's an increased level of air pollution.
Although we see that there are pockets of autism in rural areas where there's air pollution from fertilizers and from other things. So it isn't just cities, but it really, as I mentioned last week or the week before on the show, I was diagnosed with diabetes.
Right.
And I just, I've been reading as much as I can, and just read a study the other day saying that they think that diabetes is directly linked to air pollution.
Really?
And that they were actually recommending the broccoli sprout,
Right.
the sulforaphane,
Right.
that they have found that helps also with diabetes. We've seen that it can help with some autism
Right.
symptoms, and that they think that it's because there's something in it that helps mitigate air pollution.
Okay.
Isn't that bizarre?
Very interesting.
It all is going to come back to the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. And I hate to, take it to a political level, but, if you were watching the debates a couple of weeks ago, and one of the questions that they were asking, and these were just the Democratic candidates,
right.
And so, we'll look forward to, having a wider debate. Of course, we don't know whether there's going to be, a field in the Republicans or not, but talking to people about where they stand about environmental issues
Right.
and who prioritizes that. It really is a very interesting thing that we're seeing.
Needs to be a priority, this
Well, I
pollution
think
situation.
everybody is entitled to their opinion, but we're three studies now showing
Right,
that
show the
air
risk
pollution
is
is
higher.
linked to autism. So, make your decisions.
They found that the exposure to fine particles increased the children's risk of developing autism by a staggering 78%. That's pretty,
78%, folks. So
that's a pretty large number.
there we go. Anyway, so that's what we have for you in the news. And as we said, we're going to be talking with Dr. William Lane.
Yes, when we come back.
Stop being invisible.
Overcoming
Now,
communication barriers.
you're a great communicator, Nancy.
Thank you.
And you, Reed was a great communicator.
Right.
I think of myself as being on the playing field.
I think you're a great communicator.
My husband can be when he chooses to be, although in a group setting, it's not his be-all, end-all favorite.
Not his forte.
It's not that it's not his forte, because I actually think he's quite good at it, but he sometimes feels like he needs to stand in the background and be quiet. So it's a very interesting thing. I love this gentleman describing how he just felt like that wasn't necessarily the most important thing, and then one event happened that made him realize this is something I need to work on. I can't just stand in the back and be invisible. So we're going to talk with Dr. William Lane after these messages. Stick with us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. 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 Let's get wild.
Hi, it's Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to What's Left. We're enjoying some wine. We're going to make some fake bourbon chicken tonight. But we're not using bourbon. It's not gluten-free. So what we're doing, and Kristen, you're doing a great job at pounding and getting out all of your energy on that chicken. So go take it out.
I know. You know, how many of us moms are at a park or we're at a grocery store and somebody walks up to you and, you know, your child's having a meltdown and, you know, having not one of those fun days. This is a great thing to come home to. You would come home and really pound that chicken and you would feel so much better. That's basically, it kills two birds with one stone.
You're making a great meal for your family.
Yes, and you're feeling great.
You're feeling better about that jerk who said, why can't you get your kid under control?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take all your pounded, aggressive chicken and start to saute it in the skillet. And I'm just going to add a little bit of my grapeseed oil. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this in. We love the way we're going to just try to brown this up and cook it a little bit. Just a little bit of salt and pepper on top. And we're just going to go ahead and brown this. Great, Kristen. Great job. I think we're almost all brown here, so I'm going to get your help over at the cutting board, if you don't mind.
The cutting station.
The cutting station. We're going to cut this in about a third slices. You go chop it up.
Okay.
And I'm going to start on the sauce.
Okay.
We're going to take the orange juice, water, and add that in. And I'm going to measure out the fake soy sauce, a third cup. Add that in. Take in your ketchup and your brown sugar and go ahead and put that in. So in here is the red pepper flakes and ginger. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. So in the red pepper flakes, if you've got a kid that's really sensitive and doesn't like to bring a lot of heat to the kitchen, you can definitely omit that. That's not a problem. And then my favorite, as much garlic as tolerated. And the last thing that we're going to do, and as we get this heated up on the skillet, is we're going to pull this in, thicken to the sauce, and add in the arrowroot to thicken it. So we're going to go back to the frying pan. Woohoo! And put in our sauce, and we're going to bring it to a boil, and that's when I'm going to add the arrowroot. What arrowroot does for everything, like when we're baking with gluten-free flours, this adds kind of the oomph to hold it together. Arrowroot is also a great sauce thickener. So let's go in and add the chicken. Thank you again for helping get this all together. I made extra sauce because I'm a saucy girl. So we made a really nice meal here tonight. We're talking just the right flavors, right texture. So I'm going to serve you up to what we're going to have for dinner, if that sounds good to you. Yes! So
I always love coming over.
So what we made over here is just really some, what I call my dirty rice, and it's just some of the really nice different spices. I use a little red pepper flakes in that as well, beaumont, parsley, and just salt and pepper. It's really simple. And some of my favorite, which is zucchini sauteed. So I'm going to just go ahead and serve you up, and you can get to be my guinea pig once again.
I will always be a good guinea pig anytime you cook.
Bon appetit, my friend.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us at Autism Live. Kristen, I had fun with you today.
I always have fun. Thank you.
It is. It's great. And we had fun with you, too. And if you have questions or want to see us cook some more different dinners, just email us. You can email us at autismlive@gmail.com or go to Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. or Taka Now. Taka's got tons of recipes, over 2,000 recipes ready for you to come and explore and have some fun. And thanks to Holly for this great bourbon-free bourbon chicken. And we'll see you next time on What's Love? Bye, guys.
You say hi, we say hi. Let's get wild, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hi, Lisa Ackerman back with your Talk of Facts, the autism journey questions and answers that you need to help your child make the progress they need. I'm here to talk to you about one really important item. A lot of people ask me the question, well, Lisa, I want to see this specialist in another state. How do I do that? You know, I don't own a jet. I don't have the ability to fly without great pain and travel. Not a problem. We know how to get this done. So I actually encourage families, even though in travel can be a tremendous hardship getting a child with autism through security, through the plane, and in the journey to where they need to go. We have a whole white paper on Taka about how to travel with special needs kids. So it can be done. So travel, we know that can be expensive. Not everyone has an unlimited supply of cash for air flights. We love and work with this group called miracleflights.org. They're fantastic. They will fly you and your child, so one parent, one adult, anywhere in the United States, one time a year. Also in the Taka document are places to stay. So often you will have people in your life that love and support your family and don't know exactly how to help. Ask them to gift you their travel or their rewards cards or coupons for hotel, rental car. That's a great way to be able to get maybe a hotel room that has a refrigerator or a microwave and that's close to a Whole Foods, so you don't have that added cost of going out to dinner, especially if your kid has a lot of allergies. It's important to note that there's not a pediatrician or a specialist by every Starbucks in the United States. Close does not always equal best. So I bring up the travel point so you know that travel is possible, number one, and often it's really going to help you get down the road faster for your kid and getting the answers you need from the specialist that knows what to do. So don't be afraid to travel.
And we're back, and we're joined now by Dr. William Lane. He's an education consultant, academic coach, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book, Stop Being Invisible, I Want to Fit In, which is about overcoming communication barriers. So very much fits into autism spectrum disorders. Dr. Lane, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Thanks.
Good to have you.
We're thrilled to have you. And we understand from having your book that that this is inspired because of the fact that you did not consider yourself to be a good communicator. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was a very poor communicator growing up. In fact, I had very few friends when I went all through school. I can remember a number of times my mother saying, well, there goes Billy to be off by himself during family events. In third grade, I had a teacher who told me that I should probably, that my cousin was smarter than me and I should not be in the same class with her. My ninth grade counselor told me that I should probably get a job as an auto mechanic because I didn't speak to people very well. So I should stay away from interacting with people in society.
And then something happened that sort of woke you up to this whole idea and set you on a certain path. Tell us what happened.
About 3 years ago, I was in the kitchen and I was told that nobody in the family really wanted to talk to me anymore because I was labeled as the weatherman.
Huh.
To me, a good listener was somebody who did nothing but listen. I believe that you should listen 99% of the time and let the other person speak all the time. And the only question I would ask to most people was, how's the weather there? And nobody in the family wanted to talk to me if I was not going to communicate with them. And if I couldn't carry on my half of the conversation, they just were not bothering to call me. And I noticed that I wasn't getting a lot of invites from the family to events and those kind of things. And that was my wake-up call. As a former teacher, as a school administrator, and then a university professor, I was teaching people how to do this all the time. I was, teaching prospective teachers how to work with students with special needs. I was doing it in my classroom, but I wasn't practicing any communication skills that I was teaching everybody else. So I just decided that, I need to put all that I know into a book to help other people so that, they don't feel disconnected from their family, from their friends, and, their coworkers or from society.
How did you decide? How did you make the change to become a good communicator?
I guess it was small steps at a time. I mean, I just kind of would reach out, do little things. I mean, like, first I, would ask people open-ended questions. And, I would hold doors for people at like a restaurant or going into a supermarket and just say hello to people and just started that way. And, it was a lot of rejection. I mean, a lot of people would kind of look at you like, why are you talking to me? And I just kind of accepted the rejection. It was going to be like, I'm going to put myself out there and let people know that, people do want to talk to them. People do want to be accepted by, friends in society. So, and then I just started speaking, and it just, my world has totally changed. I mean, people look at me and like, when they read the book, they're like, this is hard to believe that this is where you were and where you are now.
Right.
So, yes.
And Dr. Lane, a lot of people in the autism community are talking about your book and how it can be a tool to use, especially for those individuals who are high functioning, but don't have the communication piece in terms of all the social communication. Talk to us a little bit about why, because the case has to be made sometimes for why communication is a good thing and being a good communicator can add to your life. Talk a little bit about some of the byproducts that come in your life, the positive things, when you can be a good communicator.
Well, I mean, there was a study in 2016 that was done by the national colleges and the workforce that said that 85% of your success in life is dependent on your ability to communicate. So for me, and I think for a lot of other people, the ability to communicate makes going to work, going to family events, more meaningful, more enjoyable, because a lot of people just go to work, do their job, and they go home. And they don't have that social interaction. There's no, like, after work events to go to. Like, you're not invited to go out to, like dinner with people. You just go because you don't communicate with your coworkers and they don't really know who you are. They tend to eliminate you or just not invite you to things. So, your life is I go to work and then I go home and sit by myself the whole time that, the rest of the day or the rest of the evening.
Now, you've identified 7 characteristics of good communicators. Can you go over those with us?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things of being a good communicator is that you have to be willing to take the challenge on. That I don't remember what the, like, you have to accept that people are not going to accept you as, you're going to seem different when you try to talk to people, because most people want to spend the time in technology. They don't want to carry on a conversation. You've got to put yourself out and make people feel that, you are interested in them. That, this will help you improve your life by depending on, being able to communicate. I'm trying to think of the other 6 off the top of my head, and I'm really...
That's okay.
We put you on the spot.
I put you on the spot. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's hard to memorize 7 things, isn't it?
But they can find that in the book, and one of the things that you did in the book, instead of having it just be a narrative, what you've done is turned it into a workbook that at the end of it, you talk during the chapter, and then at the end of the chapter is an opportunity, and that's exactly what you call it, is an opportunity to list goals and other things. Talk a little bit about why that was important to you.
Well, as a former teacher and as a former administrator and, like I said before, as a university professor, the students never had their textbook and their workbook together. So I thought, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to combine them so that if you have one, you really have both of them. And so when I wrote Stop Being Invisible, Overcoming Communication Barriers, it was like, okay, I'm going to make each chapter very short and you guys will be able to attest to this, that each chapter is no more than 2 or 3 pages long. I mean, I think my longest chapter is like 4 pages. And then at the end of each chapter, it's called an opportunity section. What did I learn? How can I use it? And then you come back and reflect. Okay, did it work for me? What would I need to change to make it work better for me? Or what notes can I practice when I move on to the next chapter? So it's a really easy read, and I think it's because it's broken up that way, it's something that you don't get lost in. I mean, when I read novels, they'll bring in a character, and I'm like, where is that character from? And you almost have to go back and reread 30 pages to find out where that person came from. In this, it's like each chapter is an individual idea.
And one of the things that I thought was great in the book, you right in the very beginning of the book, you take a little bit of time to talk about when people are communicating on social media. Because I feel like this is a class that all of us need to take, right?
Yeah.
Is how to communicate and things to think about when you're doing social communication, but especially for our young people and for young people on the autism spectrum, there are some real considerations, and you sort of take it head on and talk about how even if something is true, that you might want to consider whether or not to post it. Why did you feel like that was an important thing to include in the beginning, Dr. Lane?
Because I think a lot of young people don't have a sense of identity. And I think that what's happening is that they are taking steps that they're trying to gain their identity, and they're doing stuff they see on the news. So they're seeking attention, but the way that they're seeking attention is probably in the wrong way. They see people doing shootings and, causing problems in society, so they think, okay, well, that will get me attention. And that's really not the way to gain attention. For some people, they think they don't know the difference between positive and negative attention. So they think, okay, well, if I go do something and hurt other people, that will get me attention. But that's negative attention. That's not the kind of attention that people need. They want the positive attention where they're recognized for doing something well, for being able to carry on conversations, to be a family member, to be a contributing member to society. And that's why I thought that was very important that I put that in the front of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I just say, too, that I really appreciated and enjoyed that you included a section on nonverbal communication. I think a lot of times people focus so much on the communication that happens through speech and leave out all the lessons in nonverbal communication. And I just recently, I'd never heard before that most communication, 87% of communication is nonverbal, and that's across everyone, not just having
not
to
just
do
nonverbal
not
individuals.
just nonverbal individuals.
Right.
It makes sense to me,
Right.
That so much of what we convey to each other, there is the sound, and that's very efficient and effective sometimes, but it's in the other things we do too, and the way our body is, the way our face is. So I appreciated that you included that, and included the amount of personal, literally a chart with the amount of personal bubble space you should give people so that you're not the person standing too close or too far away.
Right.
So,
that is something I use in my presentations. I call it the hula hoop. And, if you're not real good friends with the person, you should have the hula hoop against your back and the front against, like where the other person is. And then as you get to know the person, you move closer. And so that kind of involves what the personal space is, because people don't always understand what personal space is, and especially students, on the spectrum, that's something that they don't understand. So having that visual concept, I think, really helps them. And going back to your other point, I think that, in my book, it's like 93% is, something I had read, that, your words only are like 7% of what you say.
Right.
It's your tone of voice, or the body language that you use. So, if you're talking to somebody and they've got their arms crossed and they're leaning back in their chair, you're showing them almost what I would call disrespect. If I was up as a professor talking, And I had a student who was sitting in the back of the room, on their phone, kicked back, had their feet up on the desk, and then they came to me and said, can you help me because I didn't understand what you'd say? It would be hard for me to, I would, but it would be difficult because that person was showing me no respect when I was teaching.
Right.
So, it's like, what message are you sending to the people that you're talking to? And you see people all the time, part of the problem is that, we talk at 150 words a minute, generally. Being from the East Coast and kind of spending a lot of time in New York, everything has to be done in a minute. But, the average person speaks about 150 words a minute, but we listen at 1,000 words a minute. So while I'm talking, you have 6 more times the time to fill your mind with something else. So if you're really not listening to what I'm saying, you could be, okay, well, he's talking, but, I can do the laundry. I can, eat dinner. I can empty the dishwasher. All those things. But, and then when I finish, I say, well, what did you think of that? And if you weren't really listening to me, you were doing these other things because you had 6 times more opportunity to listen or to hear than listen, that would cause a problem. And that's what happens a lot of times in communication is there's that gap between, how much you can, speak and how much you're able to listen. So, a lot of miscommunication happens because of that gap.
Right. You also talk about using humor. Tell us a little bit about that.
I found that humor is a really good way of starting somebody's day, or just being funny. There's and if it's, clean humor and appropriate humor, I think that's a good way of just, getting people's attention. Every morning I get up and I ask Alexa, to tell me a joke, and the joke today was, why does the zebra have stripes? And, because it doesn't want to be spotted. So, if you say that joke to somebody, people will laugh and they're like, oh yeah, and then you can start talking about other things. So it's a good icebreaker.
Right. Okay,
Absolutely.
great.
So, Dr. Lane, where can people get the book?
Well, it's available on Amazon.com, and it's also www.stopbeinginvisible.com is the actual site the book is sold on.
Okay.
Wonderful. We really thank you for
Yes,
taking the
thank you.
time to be with us today and encourage people to go either to www.stopbeinginvisible.com or to Amazon.com and pick this up. Thank you so much,
It's a
Dr.
great
Lane.
tool. Thank you, Dr. Lane.
Shannon and Nancy, thank you very much for having me on.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wonderful. So you guys can get that. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with Gretchen Leary. Stick with us.
Right.
Well, I had friends when I was in high school in preferred activities like horseback riding, electronics, or model rockets. There's a tendency sometimes to just go on and on and on talking about the same thing. And this is where someone had to tell me, you're going to tell that story twice, and that's all that people are going to want to hear it. They're going to get bored with it after hearing it more than twice. Give them, say, hey, you've talked too much about that robot. Let's talk about something else. Well, let's give some examples of things that are not perfect. Okay, if a photographer's working for the National Geographic, that would be at the pinnacle of photography career. But if you go through the National Geographic, you're probably going to find some technical errors like flare in some of the pictures. But overall, it's such a great picture, even though it had flare, you still use the picture. Also, if he's a science kid, bring up the concept of absolute zero, where all atomic motion is stopped. You can never get there, you can only approach it. Get the concept across of work up to a certain standard. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's got to be up to a certain standard. Well, when I was a young kid, there were expectations for doing things that other people want. It gets back to turn taking. I'd sit through church even though I thought it was boring. But that's something the other members of the family wanted to do. And there were expectations for me not to be disruptive. And most of the time I behaved. You know, and that's just one step beyond turn-taking in board games. You've got to learn to get your turn. Sometimes you get to pick out the movie, and other times brother or sister may pick out the movie we go to. Well, one of my really important teachers was Mr. Carluck, my science teacher. And he had interesting projects for me to do. And I worked on all kinds of stuff with optical illusions. And that actually helped me in some of my cattle work, because it made me pay attention to what the animals were seeing. And then doing interesting science projects got me motivated to study, because now I had a reason for studying. Studying was a way to get to a goal of becoming a scientist. This is where a good teacher really turns a student around. Well, there's a lot of problems in the sensory system. Distorted input, sort of like pictures pixelating with a bad satellite dish, audio cutting in and out like a really bad cell phone. A lot of the sensory systems are not working normally. In my book, The Autistic Brain, I've got a whole big section in there on sensory issues. And there's an interesting new study that's come out called Environmental Enrichment is an Effective Treatment for Autism. Now, I want to make it very clear. This does not replace ABA or speech therapy. It is an adjunct. And what's done in this, and there's a paper you can get online called Environmental Enrichment's Effective Treatment for Autism. You stimulate two senses at the same time, like maybe you do an aromatherapy, a cinnamon, something like that, touch carpet. You always changing the pair of senses that you stimulate. And one of the senses is always one of the more primitive senses, smell, touch, or balance. So there's a lot of emphasis on 8 different aromatherapies, and the people were, children were evaluated baseline. Controls got ABA and speech therapy. Experimentals got this additional sensory therapy. And then after quite a few months, they evaluated them again. And the experimental group that had the treatment had significantly better behavior. This is a refereed scientific journal article, and it uses simple household things, very simple to do. Environmental enrichment is an effective treatment for autism. You can download it online. I'll tell you some things not to do. Don't say you went to sleep, because then the child might be afraid that you went to sleep. When I was very young, we were out for a walk and came across a very flat squirrel in the middle of the road that had been run over. And it was very clear that the squirrel could not be put back together again. And that made me learn not to run out in the street, because I wouldn't want to be like that squirrel. And there's no way the veterinarian could do surgery and put him back together again. I mean, basically, you know, death of a person, they are gone. They are gone. Well, Oliver Sacks is a very kindly kind of professor type of person, and I read an article he wrote in the New York Times just before he died about, you know, going back doing the Jewish Sabbath. And at the end of the article, he was talking about, well, if A, then B, then C, which way of his life could have gone down different paths. And I started really weeping when I read that article, you know, and I'm glad it went down the path that, you know, where our paths crossed. I could barely print it out, I was so upset. No, fortunately, he was writing right up until the end. And he's overall really satisfied with his life. Well, after the article appeared in the New Yorker magazine, shortly after that, an agent appeared that suggested that I ought to write a book. And that's what brought the book Thinking in Pictures into being.
If you're watching Autism Live, chances are you care about the life of someone, or perhaps many people, living with autism. You spend countless hours trying to make a better life for them. It may not have been easy for you to watch the show today. You know, sometimes you could be juggling so many balls in the air, you feel like a circus performer. I remember recently saying to a friend that as the mother of a son with autism, plus all the other challenges in my life, I feel like I'm carrying a tray full of glasses of water, and that if one of them topples over, the whole thing is going to go crashing down. This empowerment moment is all about you. Now, I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but over the last 9 years in my autism journey, I've learned some things that have helped me shift from being a victim to having hope. See, I'd been in that place, down on the kitchen floor, on my knees, praying for answers of what happened to my child. I'd been in that place, covered with blood and tears, after one of Wyatt's giant tantrums, where I said, "Where has my fairy tale life gone?" I have a feeling you're a member of that kitchen floor club too. It's been a process, but I've come from that place of being a victim to becoming an advocate for my son Wyatt and for many others as the executive director of ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today. Let's start with reframing the way you think about yourself and your child. I want you to say after me, "I'm an activist." That's right. I'm an activist, because just by watching this program, you are taking positive steps to make the world a better place for your child or someone else living with autism. You are a positive force of action in the world. I want you to start thinking of your so-called disability as an opportunity, because it's within our challenges that our greatness is revealed. That's where we find our courage and resiliency. And parenting a child with autism is one of the greatest challenges a parent can face. You have the choice to see this as a journey of self-discovery. Some people take expeditions to climb Mount Everest to see what they're made of. You don't have to travel that far, because parenting a child with autism is an expedition of the soul. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.
And we're back, and now we're joined by Gretchen Leary. Gretchen is 31 years old. She is the author of several books, and she has Asperger's syndrome, and she's here to talk to us about her books and her projects. Welcome to the show, Gretchen.
Thank you.
We're so thrilled to have you. So Gretchen, let's start with talking a little bit about your poetry books. You've got 2 different books, Welcome to My Yesterday and Monochrome. And where can we find those books?
Okay, so those are actually old poetry books, but my children's books under Gretchen Leary, they are The Quiet Bear and Really, Really Like Me, and they're on Amazon.
Okay. And so it's a total of 4 books altogether?
The poetry books are no longer for sale. Those are really outdated. They didn't really sell very well, and they're not really for advocacy purposes. And those are, yeah.
But Really, Really Like Me, and what other book did you say is available?
Yep, and then it's The Quiet Bear. Those are my 2 children's books.
Children's books, all right. And those are available on Amazon?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And on Lulu.com.
And you said that they, something about them being for advocacy. Talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that.
So, as an individual with Asperger's or autism spectrum disorder, I really wanted to find a way, to help children. Like, I wanted to help other people feel understood or included, and I thought the best way to start is to start with younger kids. And so I wanted to reach kids that were in like the preschool age group. And so I wrote Really, Really Like Me first, and then reached out to Danny Bowman, who illustrated it. She's on the spectrum as well. And that's more of an interactive book of like a series of interactions about sensory like processing issues. For instance, like one page says, Claire really, really doesn't like loud noises and sometimes needs to cover her ears. Can you cover your ears too? So it's actually meant more for children who are not on the spectrum to gain a better understanding of those who are.
Wonderful. And of course, Danny is a good friend of ours,
Yes.
and has been on the show many times. We love Danny and her whole family. So I did not realize that she had done the illustrations for one of your books. It's a Small World. What a wonderful thing. But, well, great. So people can buy those books. They're available on Amazon, and they are under your name, Gretchen Leary.
Yeah.
Wonderful. But you also are president of something called BostonCalm. Talk to us about that.
So, growing up, I didn't have any extra services because I wasn't diagnosed until I was 23 years old. And so I really wanted to find a way to provide tools that would provide hope and just encouragement and then just calming, like coping skills for people on the spectrum. And the vice president and co-founder, Christopher McIntyre, he has Tourette syndrome, and so the BostonCalm is all about supporting people with autism spectrum disorder and Tourette syndrome by providing occupational therapy tools and letters of encouragement to individuals with autism spectrum disorder and eventually Tourette syndrome as well. So we give to Boston Children's Hospital's autism program with a collaboration with the Rotary Club of Needham, who's helped tremendously, and then Boston Public Schools, Boston Medical Center's autism program, and then various other autism programs. And this all started this year.
And when you say you give to them, what is it that you're giving to them?
So there's two different projects, and it depends on the program that we're giving to. But for instance, the care packages, I call them sensory care packages that we give to Boston Children's Hospital. They include noise-canceling ear muffs, and a weighted lap pad, a teddy bear, and some fidget toys. We've also given to groups of adults, so not all of that will be exactly the same. So for like our donation to the Autism Asperger's Network, or AANE, we gave like earplugs and some like more fidget toys and books that were written by adults on the spectrum, as well as something that I started with a letter program where we asked people like Danny Bowman and Erin Clemens and Rachel Barcelona and Haley Moss to write letters of encouragement to other people that are also on the spectrum to give them some hope. And so I printed out copies of each of those and gave them to the individuals at AANE. And so that's a separate project. But, you know, we're really kind of growing. We just donated to a barbershop because we realized it would be really helpful for children or even adults that are on the spectrum to sit still. It's beneficial for a lot of different diagnoses, but really we just wanted to provide some hope and some calming like coping tools for individuals that really need them.
It sounds like you focus a lot on sensory issues. Can you talk about that?
So, like the weighted lap pad, personally for me, I have a lot of issues with like textures and bright lights and heat. I have a lot of sensitivities to different sensory like stimuli. So like tags on clothing drives me crazy, and then really loud noises like fire alarms can be really difficult for me. Like really not like annoying, but like physically painful. And I'm kind of known as the girl with the perpetual sunglasses on my head. I actually had to remind myself to take them off before we started today because I always have them on my head, like pretty much all the time. And it's really just because even fluorescent lights in a building bother me. So.
And you know, you could have worn them for this interview. We would have been so supportive of that. And if you feel that you want to put them on, please do. I feel like a lot of times, I imagine that part of the frustration of being on the spectrum is not being able to communicate to those of us that don't have these issues how difficult it can be. And I think we all need to be much more open to people like you talking about what the issues are and going so far to say, it's not that it's just uncomfortable for me, I'm in pain when this has happened. I think a lot of people just don't get that, Gretchen. Is that frustrating for you?
It is. There's a lot of people that really undermine my struggles. There's a lot of people that say that I don't seem like somebody with autism spectrum disorder, but I think that, I mean, like, if I could have like a dime for every time I've heard that, I'd be a really wealthy woman. But a lot of those people have had like a 5-minute interaction and are basing it on Rain Man, you know, and I think that there's a lot of lack of understanding. So that when people talk about autism awareness, I think people misunderstand what they mean by that, because I think the awareness that's needed is more about how to be helpful, because everyone knows for the most part what autism is, but they don't really understand that autism can look very different from individual to individual. So, you know, I don't act anything like Sheldon, and I don't act like anything like Dr. House or Rain Man or any other character that's portrayed as somebody similar to somebody on the spectrum.
Yeah. And I know that you are a wonderful outspoken advocate for services for adults. We have so many people who will write into the show, and I think one of the great tragedies is that just like with kids that are younger, it's a full spectrum. And it's everywhere from people who are adults on the spectrum who need a lot of help and support to people who just need a little bit. And I honestly think that there's very little for adults. There's more and more each year, but it's still very little. When people write to you or call you, Gretchen, and say, what's available for adult services? There are a bunch of stuff that you know about that we just don't know?
Well, I'll tell you, I applied for adult autism services when I lived in Houston for a while, and when I called them, they did like a 20-minute intake, and then they told me that the wait list was approximately 12 years long.
Oh my gosh.
That,
12 years.
Keep calling and updating if my number or address changes in the next 12 years, but to expect at least 10 to 12 years before I would receive any help. So,
what kind of services were you applying for, Gretchen?
I actually don't even know. It was just considered state services. So obviously I don't even live in Texas anymore, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
12 years.
I feel like there's so many nonprofits out there that are all about research, and I really wanted to be a part of like the solution in the sense that there's nothing wrong with the nonprofits that help with research. Those are wonderful and they have their place, but I really wanted to be a part of actually providing a real service to individuals. And so there's, obviously different types of nonprofits, and we're a very small one, but I really would like to make a big impact in the long run.
Well, tell us how people can reach you.
And how they can help.
Okay, so we have a website, and it's BostonCalm.org, so BostonCalm.org. And it actually talks about what we do, who our sponsors are, who we work with. And the response has been tremendous so far in people that have donated. But you can actually write to us. There's an email address like BostonCalm@gmail.com. You can reach us that way. But all that is contact information is on the website. And we don't right now, we're not at a capacity where we can really give individual people care packages right now. So we give them to like organizations or programs, and then they distribute them, or we give them to a business. But we just want to be fair across the board because the need is so great, and so we want to be fair about who we give to.
Well, it's a great cause, and we encourage people to reach out to you.
Well, and I appreciate that your poetry books are no longer available, but I understand you've started writing poetry again, but to music in a very unique way.
Yes. So I have this thing where it's not just listening to classical music, but I do have a blog, so that's GretchenLeary.wordpress.com, but I will listen to a classical piece, whether it's Chopin or Beethoven or Mozart, and I will try to tell a story based on what I'm listening to. So, and actually, one of those times, I think this was back in 2012, I believe it was. I shared one of those poems with Josh Groban, and he then shared it on Twitter, and so it really inspired me to keep going with that. And so I've written like poems like to Mozart Symphony No. 25 and Beethoven Symphony No. 9. Like I try to interpret based on the music what I'm actually hearing, like actually making a story, not lyrics, but actually writing a kind of a story, like a narrative of what I feel is happening while I'm listening to the piece.
That's brilliant, Gretchen.
Absolutely.
And you had that on your blog, information about that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's another way people can reach you.
Well, we really want people to check out, especially the 2 children's
Yes.
books on Amazon. And do you also have a website where everything is available, Gretchen?
I don't at the moment. I'm kind of working on getting that back up. Right now, the focus has been on the nonprofit. But if you Google my name, Gretchen Leary, you'll probably find everything. I think that my blog, the Gretchen Leary at like WordPress.com or .wordpress.com, I think that it has all the links to everything.
Okay, great.
Wonderful.
Great.
Gretchen, thank
Well,
you for all that you're doing and for taking the time to be with us
Thank you
today.
for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with all your future endeavors and with BostonCalm.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
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 What a lovely young woman.
Yeah, very ambitious.
Yes, a lot of
has a lot
different
going on.
things going on. In any case, so
We're out of time.
we are out of time. I want to thank you for being here and
Thank
thank
you for
all of our
having me.
guests for being here. Make sure that you're back with us on Monday.
Yes, what have you got
We've got
coming
a
up?
great show on Monday. Of course, I can't think of right now.
Right, can't think of it.
We've got another author. I can't think.
Okay.
I can't think. But be with us on Monday, and we'll have lots of news and new things happening next
Okay.
week. All right. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.